Chris Hansen here from New York City, and you're watching Have a Seat with Chris Hansen live here. Thanks for joining us. As you know, Vincent DeCotra, my web producer, is with us, and we have a very special guest tonight, Ryan Reynolds, aka Medium Rare, who you probably know from his involvement in the Onision story and his own web show called Medium Rare. Over the last few weeks, we have had a number of alleged victims of Onision, Gregory Jackson, very compelling, very important stories, talking about grooming, talking about enticement, talking about sexual misconduct, talking about abuse, talking about harassment, all kinds of very, very ugly allegations, all pretty much laid out on video by Gregory Jackson, Onision himself. Also about the transmission of child pornography, essentially, both by him, allegedly, and by his wife, Kai. So after hearing from those victims, which I think is very, very important, and we're going to hear from more as we continue our investigation into Gregory Jackson, Onision, and Kai, I did want to tonight have with us someone who was inside the forums, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. These are the areas where people are having these discussions, where there are allegations that inappropriate pictures, potentially illegal pictures of underage kids were swapped, approaches were made, all kinds of things were going on involving followers of Gregory Jackson, Onision, and potentially Gregory Jackson himself. Before we get into the interview with Ryan Reynolds, aka Rag, and Medium Rare, I should also tell you that we've got some developments from the FBI tonight, and I'll get into that a little later in the show. Also, a statement from YouTube, which I have been trying to get a comment out of officially and an interview with for some time, having to do with all this, and you know the drama that so many YouTube streamers have been going through, tripping this algorithm where you say too many of the wrong words and you get sanctioned, whereas a guy like Onision, who is accused of all kinds of illegal activity, is allowed to stay on. So there was always these nagging questions about how that was possible, and why are they sanctioning other people for really no great cause, and nobody at YouTube has been able to explain that to me, or to my knowledge anybody else. We've reached out to the CEO, Susan Wojcicki, the media department, and today a statement involving all this, which I'll get into as well. But first of all, Ryan Reynolds, Rag, thank you very much for being with us tonight, all the way from Scotland in the UK. How are you tonight?
I am wonderful, although a bit tired.
A bit tired. Well, you're staying up late with the time change there, so I appreciate you coming on. Tell me, Ryan, how did you first become aware of Onision, of Gregory Jackson?
Well, I first became aware of Onision back in either 2009 or 2010. In 2010 is when I joined his forums, but I discovered him on YouTube. A couple of his comedy videos I came across, and at that age I found it to be quite amusing. It was just a guy making a fool out of himself on the internet, and that amused me.
You were just a kid at the time. What are you, 13, 14?
Yeah, I was 13 years old in 2010.
All right, so you're sitting in Scotland, you're 13 years old, you come across Onision. What was it that attracted you to him? What made you watch him?
Well, initially, as I said, it was the comedy in the first place, and then from there, I checked out his other channels. He used to have a YouTube channel called Onision Speaks. He still has that channel, and on there he would give his opinions about subjects. He would give people advice and stuff like that, and that's how I then discovered his forums, because he used to have people on his forums contact him with like a question. So say it was someone who said, oh, I want to come out the closet, but my parents are hardcore Christians. What should I do? So Onision would then go to his forums, and he would make a video responding to whatever the question was on the forum. So when I first joined up, that was my intention, as it was a lot of other people. It was, oh, get Onision to notice me. Let's write a little contact Onision message and see if he responds to it in a video.
Got it. And did you ever think back at the time, as a young teenager, that you would see Onision, Greg Jackson, accused of everything he's accused of today, involved in this kind of online behavior that is so bizarre?
At that point, Definitely not. Definitely not. I mean, when you're 13 years old, you're not even thinking about that kind of thing. I mean, as I grew up, that's not something that ever crossed my mind ever. Maybe when I was 19, 20, 21 years old, maybe around those times I thought, oh, maybe it's a possibility. But prior to that, I never had a single inclination to think something like that.
How long did you follow him until you got involved in this, deeply involved in this whole life on the forums, and take me inside these forums and tell me
Okay.
what's going on there. I mean, you're a kid, you're 14, 15 years old. What lured you into this, and what was happening there?
All right. Well, as I said, I first joined, I was 13 years old, and it was initially because I'm trying to get Onision's attention, as are a lot of other people. People joining these forums, they're joining because they're Onision fans. They think, oh, I'll get Onision's attention, and if not, I will communicate with other Onision fans. And as everyone knows, Onision's fan base is mainly young people. It's mainly young teens. So I was right in that demographic. I spent from 2010 until 2016 being very, very active in this community. I was in and out in 2017, but 2017 onwards, I was gone. I was a moderator in 2015, but I'll get to that in a bit. But as I was a kid, when I was 13 years old, I joined these forums, and I was always someone, a bit of a loner in school and all that sort of thing. I had a few friends, but I didn't have that many friends.
This was your social activity, basically.
Yes, that's what I'm getting to. So me and many other people on these forums, this was our social life. We were growing up. This was our social life. These were our friends. We made friends on the internet because maybe we had weird interests, or we just didn't get on very well with people at school or whatever. So you would have hundreds of people coming to these forums who are then making online friends or making internet friends. And that's not something exclusive to Onision's community. That happens all over the internet. But this is my experience on specifically Onision's forums, obviously. So all these people are growing up. For me specifically, I spent 6-7 years where I was just on there all the time. I lived and breathed those forums. So I would get up, I would check the forums before I go to school. I would go to school, be thinking about what I wanted to say on the forums and talk to my friends about when I got back home. And then I'd come home from school and sit there the rest of the night till like 2 a.m., pretending I was sleeping so my mum wouldn't take my iPod or my iPad or whatever it would be at the time off of me, because I'd be on the forums very late at night talking to these friends I've made. So I think that's very important to establish, because it's something that you can get very, very sucked into. And for me, the forums were very, very influential in developing my sort of mentality and personality moving forward.
Looking back, was this unhealthy? Were you exposed to things you shouldn't have been exposed to as a young teen?
100%. And that's what I was going to get to now, because I wanted to make that clear that I spent all this time from 13 to 18, 19 years old. And obviously that's a time when you're going through very formative teenage years. So you're very influenced by the things going around you, especially if there's adults or whatever who are engaging in certain activities, or the people around you. So you suddenly become desensitized to a lot of things. So you see someone being doxxed, and the first time you think, oh, well, this person's information was released, that's horrible. But by the time you've seen it 3 times, you start thinking, oh, well, it's actually not that bad. It happens all the time. What's the worst that could happen? And the same
how many other kids, Rag, do you think were out there? Thousands, millions?
On Onision's forums specifically, I mean, there were thousands of users. They weren't all super active. I mean, a lot of people would come on and they would leave a couple of days later or a week later. There were some people who would stick around much longer, me being one of them. I know many others who did stick around for a long time. So there is a bit varied. But these people were all growing up with a lot of very toxic behaviors around them, such as harassment, online bullying, doxing going on. You're very desensitized to that. And obviously that's a step below what we're going to discuss now, which is obviously these undesirables, as I'd call them, since we can't use a certain word. But these people, yeah, these people would, I view the forums as a catalog for these undesirables. And adults would come on here. They would make friends with people who were underage. People 18 plus would be on there being friends with people much, much younger than them. And that was the norm. I would say maybe 75% of the active user base were under the age of 18 on these forums when I was there for the 6 or 7 years that I was engaged there.
Rag, you yourself had a relationship while you were underage with somebody who was an adult.
Yes, I did. I had a relationship with someone who was 20, 21 years old when I was 15, 16 years old. And that went on, stretched around the course of a year. And that's something that at the time I viewed as very normal. I had seen other people in the community who had been involved with similar sort of arrangements. I had seen friends who had been 15 with someone who's 25, or I'd seen friends who had been 14 and someone's 20 or whatever. So when it happened with me, I just thought it was normal as well. And no one really said anything. So that's something that not until the last actual couple of years, I mean, we're talking, this was back in 2013, and it's not been until the last couple of years I've actually realized maybe there was something going on there. I feel like in my head, I've repressed a lot of experiences that I've had. I mean, that's just something I experienced. I've had lots of other, like, women, for example, who have had children, even, who, when I was 15, 16 years old on these forums, had said things like, "You're the only person younger than me that I would have sex with." And that's a very bizarre statement, obviously, to make to someone so young when you're in your mid-20s, 30 years old.
When you talk about a relationship, what happened? Was there an exchange of sexually explicit photographs? Was there
Yes.
chance?
It's mainly
relationship precisely.
Well, it's an online long-distance relationship, and I know many other people who were involved in similar things. But from my experience and from friends that have told me in their sorts of relationships, it's very much romantic and sexual conversations, along with this solicitation of nude images as well, back and forth on both parties. That is kind of the thing that always happens in these situations. I mean, that's specific relationships. I can name countless examples of instances where people met others on the forums and it was just simply one picture exchange. There was no relationship. It was just a picture sent over or a picture sent back, and that was it. There's probably more of those than there were actual relationships that were formed.
So this was pretty standard behavior activity on these forums that were related to Onision's YouTube channel. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. So what I want to say is that this whole thing is obviously, it was Onision branded. These aren't just a random YouTube forum. This isn't just a random forum. This is onision.net, onision.co. The URL used to change all the time. These were Onision branded forums. And with that, obviously, comes responsibility on Onision's part of, this is my name. I think as well, Onision knows that his fan base are largely very young people, young impressionable people. So at first glance, I would say I'm not sure how much responsibility Onision has for the things that maybe go on there, so long as they're happening off it. Like, these nude images were never, to my knowledge, exchanged actually on the forums, but people would meet on the forums and the toxic community was there, and then they would exchange on Snapchat or something like that.
However, forums related to Onision, officially sanctioned by Onision, were they known for the exchange of sexually explicit pictures of underage boys and girls?
Well, yes, there have been people who were underage and they sent their images to other people who were adults. But it never happened, to my knowledge, actually on the forums. But the point I'm trying to make is that even though it didn't happen on the forums, I think Onision still bears the responsibility of knowing for a fact that he has a young audience. And if you've got a young audience, why on earth would you create an internet forum for such a young audience? I mean, that's essentially like creating a social media for 13-year-olds. It's like creating Facebook for only children. That's essentially what I view that is, and it's very strange. I mean, it would be different, for example, if a creator whose demographics were people in their 30s to then go create an internet forum, because people are going to engage and have conversations and stuff. But there is something a bit strange when Onision, who knows that his fan base are 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, creating a platform for these people to then go into. There's something a bit off about that, and I think that's something to keep in mind.
So you believe that Onision bears responsibility for creating a forum that was essentially, a hangout for young teens, and it was known by adults looking to meet and exchange sexually explicit material with young teens, that they could meet them there and perhaps take them out of the forum and conduct this illegal, potentially illicit activity?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know how much predators, I can't say that word, undesirables outside of the forums knew about what was going on there. But I'm sure, I mean, I've heard some individuals comment or make comments like, oh, we know that, I've heard that that's the place these people go because they know that Onision has a young fan base, so they will specifically target that place. And I've known people as young as being 11 or 12 years old who have been on these forums. But what I think the most important thing to touch on here is obviously it's not the biggest deal in the world to have a lot of toxic behavior going on, so long as it's being moderated and people are being banned and the community is completely against it. But the Onision forums harbored a very toxic community where things were normalized and people were desensitized from things. And for example, the relationship I had with someone older than me, the relationships my friends have had with people older than them, was something that was never demonized. It was something that most people looked at and thought, oh, I'll just ignore that. I'll be a bystander. That's just what it is. Maybe one or two people would come out of the woodworks and they'd say a thing or two. They'd say, oh, I don't like that. But nothing ever came of those things. So yes, some people stood up and said, no, that's wrong. But they never took enough of a stand for anything to actually be done about it.
How old was Onision when these forums were set?
Oh, I don't know. To my knowledge, he's had forums since about 2006 or something. So he's been on this sort of thing since 13, 14 years ago. So I don't know how old he is. I can't remember how old he's. What is he, 32 or something? I don't remember his age.
Right now, yeah.
So I think he would have been in his early 20s when he first started up with forums or whatever.
Old enough to know what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, and maybe not back then, but certainly in the future. I mean, that's something that even if you start off doing the forums, you can always correct your behavior later and decide, okay, well, that didn't work out so well. There were clearly undesirable people on there. That was a toxic community. So let's not do that again. Yeah, right. Onision would actually recreate his forums every 3 or 4 months. Every few months, there would be a new forum put up. It would change its URL. It would go from onision.net to onision.co, and then it would go from onision.co to onision.com, and then it would go from onision.com back to onision.net. So these were constantly being remade. So you can't even use the excuse of, oh, Onision made the website and then forgot it existed or anything like that. He was actively creating a new forum every few months.
And so not only was he actively creating it, but he was benefiting from it, right?
Well, yeah, he had ads and stuff on the website, so when people are clicking on there, he's going to get some ad revenue from people watching those ads and seeing those clicks on the pages and whatever. So yeah, he would be getting money from that. He also got video content, as I said earlier. He had a contact Onision page where people could go on the forum and leave a message, and hopefully he would respond to it in a video. And in a video, he often did. So he also used it to try and get content for his YouTube channel.
So he would lure this content in.
Well, yeah, and I think it's pretty obvious that the people who want Onision to notice him are going to be the younger people. I mean, I can't imagine a grown man or a grown woman who's almost 30 years old thinking, oh, you know what, I'm really excited to get a comment from Onision. I really want Onision to notice me.
Right.
So that's not something that people that age tend to do. That's something that preteens do. That's something that young girls or young boys tend to do. Like that's what I did. I was 13 years old. And that's the majority of what these posters were. They were very, very young people who would come on there to try and get Onision's attention.
However old he was at the time, he was old enough not to be attracting teens into this sort of activity. Is that fair to say?
Oh, definitely, yeah. He was definitely over 18 at the time, whenever he started.
Do you think he was taking advantage of kids in vulnerable ages, in vulnerable situations, using these forums?
I can't comment on that. I honestly have no idea. Not to my knowledge. I do not believe he had any interaction with kids or anything to my knowledge, other than maybe like responding to their advice. Like they're asking for advice and he might have left a comment under their post or something. But to my knowledge, he didn't really have any sort of connections or one-on-one conversations with anyone on the website, and that included everyone. The only people, to my knowledge, he ever actually communicated with one-on-one were me and also another moderator called Erica, and she was a moderator for a very long time, from 2009 onwards. Maybe before that, he spoke to other people, but in my time, he spoke to me when I was a moderator in 2015. He spoke to me via email. I could email him anytime and he'd respond, and also Erica could get one-on-one correspondence with him. But to my knowledge, no one else spoke to him one-on-one.
Given all the allegations about, him allegedly grooming, enticing fans in their teens, and then in some cases luring them into relationships both in person and online. Kai allegedly, and there's some pretty strong evidence indicating that that activity took place with her as well. Does that cast suspicion over this whole forum, knowing what we know today?
I'm not sure. I mean, I think there's definitely suspicion there. And I know, for example, that Kai was a member on there. I know that Shiloh was a member on there once. I know that many of Onision's exes or people he's with now were on his forums at one point. To my knowledge, I mean, I'm not completely read up on the whole ins and outs of the relationship, but to my knowledge, Kai started out on the Onision forums trying to get Onision to notice her. Well, sorry, him.
It's just to be clear, I think most people know that Kai is a woman who's transitioning as a transgender into a man.
Yeah.
How did you become a moderator in his forum?
Okay, so obviously I was there from 13 years old. When I was 16, I was banned from the forums. That was in 2013. I was banned for a little bit of time. I was banned for basically I wasn't a very good forum member. I was just posting things I shouldn't have been posting, causing up some trouble as I did back in the day. I started my own forums at that point, but maybe 6 months later or so, I rejoined the forums. And shortly after that, then I was on there for a while. And in 2015, I became a moderator. And I became a moderator because I became friends with Erica, who was the head moderator before me. So what happened was Erica used to choose moderators to run the website. And by the time 2015 came around, Erica wasn't really too much involved in the community anymore. So she was kind of taking a step back, and I'd become quite good friends with Erica. So she decided to tell Onision to make me a moderator of equal status to her. And at that point, she kind of stepped back.
And you had conversations via email with Onision and during all this, how did he strike you? What did you guys communicate about? Just was it business? Or
it was business. I mean, just to clarify as well, I've seen a lot of people asking, "Oh, were you paid to moderate? Were you paid to do this?" And no one was ever paid to moderate. Just to make that clear, it was very much a volunteer thing, and the reason for that was we enjoyed being part of the community, and we wanted to help out. People wanted to feel like they had a bit of authority in this community, have a bit of a say of how things go. So it was entirely a pleasurable, enjoyable thing for us to do. But in my correspondence with Onision, it was mainly about I almost said Discord there, sorry, the forums. Right. So I would speak to him about the forums saying, oh, well, we've got this issue or we've got that issue, or here's a suggestion. We could improve the forums here. We could tighten up security there. That sort of thing. I found him to be very distant, didn't really respond very well. I could write him 3 paragraphs. He would respond saying, okay. So it was I found it to be very hard to communicate with him. I got a very bad opinion of him trying to talk to him on email.
How did he treat you aside from that? Do you remember any instances of any
dialogue? He always gave off the impression that he liked me, because he had responded to a few of my forum posts saying he found me to be funny. He liked my sense of humor. I've done other live streams with Onision in the past as well, where I've trolled him or made a few jokes or whatever and just kind of had a bit of fun there. So he's always seemed to quite enjoy my sense of humor in the past, although there was a couple of times where he had a falling out with me. I was banned from his forums another point because I disagreed with him on politics. That was something that happened on the forums quite regularly, where he would he was very distant from the forums. He would just look at this contact Onision section I spoke about earlier, but every so often he would come onto the forums and bring down his authoritarian hammer and decide, well, today all meat eaters are banned because I'm a vegetarian, and if you're not, then you're a horrible person, and everyone would get banned. Or there was another time where he says, well, today there's no longer allowed to be any male moderators because I do not trust men. Or another day he'd come on and say, well, today you're not allowed to have this opinion. If you disagree with me, you're banned. So that sort of thing was quite common, and that turned a lot of the Onision forums user base actually against Onision. The regular user base, the most active people on the Onision websites, the majority of them were not Onision fans. They either felt indifferent to him or they didn't like him, and it was because of the way he acted.
Did you, as a moderator, ever see any adults preying on people underage?
I did once, well, more than once, but one very specific instance. was with a guy called Robert Ripley, Robert Cassio, who is a convicted child. You know what? He is convicted, and we discovered him. Me and my friends discovered this guy lurking around on the websites. And this was when Onision had just created a brand new forum. So the last one had been shut down. This was, say, a few months later. And he posted this new forum. And when that happened, this was when me and Erica were the only two moderators. But we hadn't been set up with the correct permissions on the website. So we didn't actually have the power to ban anyone. And we hadn't realized that. So what happened was we discovered that this guy, this Robert guy, who was a convicted you know what, was on this website. And that was very, very concerning to me. Prior to this point, as I say, I'd been very desensitized by many other things. I had seen the exchange of nude images from minors to adults and whatever. That had been completely normalized to me. So I never thought anything of that. Neither did many other people. But when it came to someone who was actually a convicted person for that was a complete shock to me. So I'd never seen anything like that. So I was in no way desensitized to that. So immediately I emailed Onision. I emailed him right away and I said, I did not have permissions to ban this guy. This guy is on your forums. I sent him a link to the guy's criminal record saying, here it is. Can you please give me the permissions to ban this guy? Because we need to get him off of there. I have the correspondence of that initial email, but I do not have any other emails. I couldn't find them. I had to look through a couple of weeks ago to try and find any other correspondence. So I do not remember how Onision responded to this. I do not remember it ever being spoken about again. I think it was sort of a, okay, I'll deal with it type response. I don't think there was ever any sort of closure. That I never felt like the whole thing was closed. I just felt like, okay, I've sent it to him and okay, he's going to do something about it, but I never really heard anything back.
Tell me about how Onision used to rate young women's bodies.
Okay, so that was after I was a moderator, but I know about this. So I stopped being a moderator probably mid 2016 or something, around there, maybe early 2016. And I think it was about the end of 2016, he started up another forum. I think it was onision.xyz. And this was a forum at this point. All of the regular users that I knew from the past left. They had all gone. They had given up on the community. They had all moved on with their lives. Most people were gone. And what you had left was basically all these super Onision fangirls and fanboys who were very, very young and impressionable. Those were the people left over. Back in my day, back in the day of me and my friends, we used to be quite mean. There was like a lot of cliques. There was a lot of little cliques going around, and we used to basically we didn't want the annoying Onision fans to be around. So someone would come into the chat quoting Onision saying, "I'm a banana," in the chat room, and we'd say, "Well, go away, we don't care." So a lot of these actual really, really young people who are 11, 12, 13 years old, a lot of them we actually used to push away. So it wasn't there wasn't quite as many of them. There still were there, but there weren't quite as many of them back in that day. So there weren't as many Onision fans. But by the time this Onision.xyz site came along in 2016, 2017, these people had all gone. So now these people would come in, all these young people, and they were basically allowed free reign because me and my friends, so to say, weren't there to bully them away. I mean, that's a horrible way to phrase it, but you know what I mean. We're not pressuring them away. They're allowed to say and do what they want. And this is when Onision says, okay, I'm not doing my contact Onision for advice anymore. Instead, I've got a new format on my Bro channel, which is where he reacts to images and things. So on here, instead of having contact Onision, he has submit images. So you go into this thing and it's submit your facial piercings, or submit a picture of your body to rate it 1 to 10, rate your teeth, rate this. And people would go in and they would post a picture, and then Onision would react to these pictures in his videos. And sometimes that was rating a girl's body 1 to 10. And some of these girls were under the age of 18, and it was made clear on the forums. There was other posts on the forums where it was like, hey, post your age here. And the person would say, hi, I'm a 14-year-old girl named Susie, and I'm from this country. And then a few minutes later, she's in the Rate My Body thread posting a picture of her in a swimsuit. And then Onision's got that on his channel, rating the body. So that's the kind of thing that happened on there. I was not a moderator at that point. I saw some of the activity from the outside. I wasn't really there for it. I made maybe a handful of posts on the website across months and months. But yeah, I wasn't really part of that, but that's what was going on there.
What does that say about Onision, that he was soliciting underage girls for pictures and then rating their bodies?
Well, there is something just really bizarre about that. I don't know how to actually explain how that makes me feel. There's just something about it that I just think, what? Like, why would you do that? I don't quite understand. I mean, he says that later on, he did add a thing that said 18 plus only. That was later on. That wasn't until people started criticizing him. He did add 18 plus only. But people who were under 18 would still access that. It's like right now he's going through a thing where he says my patrons on Patreon were not allowed, before it was deleted obviously, are not allowed to be under 18, or people in my Discord are not allowed to be under 18, or people following me on Twitter are not allowed to be under 18. If I find you, I will ban you. Yet there are still hundreds and there are thousands of these people in his community, because he's saying it as a disclaimer type thing. He's saying no under 18s is a way to try and defer their responsibility. It's not a way, it's not because he actually means it. It's not because he knows he's going to enforce it. It's because he knows that can try and get a few people off his back.
Why did you stop moderating?
I stopped moderating simply because one of the websites shut down, as they always did. So I was moderating for maybe about, I can't remember the exact time frame. I want to say between 6 and 9 months on a website, onision.co it was at the time. I think it started at about March 2015 and it ran till about the end of the year. So for, I think the majority of that year I was moderating there. But when that website shut down, I then was never made moderator on the next website. He started up the next website months later, but he never gave me that same moderator power back. So I was kind of just left a bit out of it. And that's just kind of how I started slowly backing off as well. At that point as well, a lot of people that I knew, like a lot of the active community and the people I had made friends with, they were starting to back off as well. So the community slowly stopped moving forward to the next iterations of the websites. And I don't know if that's just because people were growing up or whatever, but that's what happened.
What bothered you most about what you saw in these forums?
The worst thing I ever specifically saw, the worst instance I remember from the forums, was the thing that happened to Regina. And obviously that's been covered, but I'll tell my version of events that I remember.
Regina, I think everybody knows who's watching tonight is you know, one of the victims who was groomed and in this whole ordeal, and there's some allegations of sexual impropriety online and between Kai and Greg and Regina. And Regina appeared on the show a few weeks ago, but go ahead. How did you come across it?
So it was 2012. I specifically remember it was near the end of 2012. And obviously I had met Regina on the Onision Forums. I had been kind of friends. We were never close friends or anything. We had spoken a few times and whatever. So I was well aware of who Regina was. I had nothing against her. I wasn't friends per se with her either. I was also involved with another large group of people on the forums who were very, very toxic at the time. They were involved in a lot of doxing. They were involved in a lot of things that should not have been going on. And I was very desensitized to at the time. One of these people was the person that I ended up dating when I was underage and whatever. So anyway, so what happened was there was a forum moderator and he was a grown man and he was speaking to Regina while Regina was underage, and he was well aware of that. Regina sent him nude images of herself, which he then, for whatever reason, passed on to someone else, who then passed them on to a friend of mine, the person that I was dating at the time, or just after that, I think I was dating them, and they passed it on to a friend of theirs. And the friend of theirs was someone who did not like Regina. And the reason they gave for not liking Regina was that Regina lied about her age. Or their age. I think Regina uses they, them pronouns or whatever. But they said Regina lied about their age. And that's why they didn't like Regina, because Regina was saying that they were 18 or 19 years old when, and as a matter of fact, Regina was 14, 15 years old. So they said Regina was going to deserve what they were now doing. So what they did was they hacked into Regina's Facebook account, other social networks, went to 4chan, other message boards online, and posted these nude images all over the internet, including on Regina's Facebook page that had thousands of followers on it as well. And they did this because they said Regina deserved it for lying about Regina's age.
What kind of people do this?
Very bad people. That's
besides being illegal.
Yeah.
A horrifying re-victimization.
And that's not even the worst part. I mean, that's obviously so horrible, but I think the worst part was the reaction to this, because the people involved were never ostracized from our community. The people involved were never banned from any website. The people involved remained part of these websites for years to come. Maybe one or two of them faded off into the darkness and we never heard from them again, but equally as many people still stuck around as if nothing had happened. Maybe a couple of people spoke out and said that was wrong, but a couple of months later, everyone was back to normal, thinking, oh, okay, that's what's going on, and it moved on. And it horrifies me to think that actually happened, and that I was friends with the people who did that as well. I mean, that's how bad things were. I mean, to me, that obviously now it's thinking back, it's so horrible. And at the time, I thought it was off as well, but I was, I don't know, 15 years old. And after a couple of years of being around this toxic community, I thought, okay, well, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. Whereas now look back and it's like, I can't believe they did that, or that I saw that happen.
What does that say about the toxicity of this forum?
That's exactly my point, because I don't think I think the whole toxicity is, because the question is, why do people allow these things to happen? Because you could ask anyone, is this right or is this wrong? And I'm sure every single person you ask that question to would say that was categorically wrong. It should not have happened. I think everyone would agree on that. But the question is then, why did everyone stand back and not say anything about it? I mean, maybe they said things, but why did no one take a stand? Why did no one demand this person has to be kicked out of our community? Why did people stay friends with these people? That's the question that I have. And I mean, that's something that's very complex. Obviously, that's the human psyche is a very peculiar thing. I'm no expert, but I think a lot of that is to do with the desensitization that I've spoken about already, the toxicity on these forums. I mean, you start off and it's people sending messages to each other saying, go kill yourself, or it's people saying, oh, I hate you. And it's maybe harassment or cyberbullying or whatever at first. And then that goes from there. And it's a little step up to doxing. And it's like, oh, well, now I've released your home address. And it's always a little step above. And the first time you experience that, you think, okay, that's wrong. But after it happens a couple of times, you think, okay, well, that's just normal. And especially when you're young and the people doing this are old. When you're 13, 14, 15, and you're seeing these things and it's adults who are doing it, that suddenly makes you think, okay, well, it can't be that bad.
Ultimately, who's responsible for what was going on in these forums?
I think at the end of the day, it comes down to the man who owned the forums. It was an Onision branded forum. I don't specifically blame Onision for every single little action that happened. I understand and appreciate the fact that obviously he can't control what every single person is saying on this website. But at the end of the day, he is the one who created this website, knowing that he had such a young, impressionable fan base. He knew, as I already said, his demographics were young teens, young people. And these are the people he was making a website for. He knew that. So I think at the end of the day, the responsibility does fall on him. You could also make an argument it falls on some of the moderators. Some of the moderators more so than others. I mean, for example, I'll take some of the blame out that I've made a video already about this in depth, but without anyone saying anything. I came out on my own accord and said, well, I've been a bystander to some of these things in the past. I would maybe excuse some of that by saying I was very young when I joined. I was 13 years old, and by the time I actually had any power to do anything, I was so indoctrinated, so desensitized to everything, I didn't think there was anything wrong with what was going on at the time. It's not until now I'm out of that community I realize how bad it was. But yeah, other moderators, like the one who, for example, was helped leak Regina's nude images, they don't have the same excuse. They were maybe mid-20s up to 30 years old, so they're not got the same excuse of, oh, I was desensitized as a kid to all this on the forums and suddenly I think that's okay. You don't have the same excuse there being a bystander when you're considerably older, I don't think. But I do think that in the end it falls back to Onision, obviously.
This has had a significant impact on Regina as a victim. She's got to live with this.
Of course, yeah. And it's happened to many other people as well, and that's what's horrible. I mean, Regina's the most... I said Regina is probably the worst example I can give you. To my knowledge, that is the worst thing I ever saw. I don't know if it's because maybe something else happened to someone else I wasn't friends with or didn't know. So maybe there was something worse I don't know about. But the thing I know about that was the worst was the thing that happened to Regina. I mean, I'll give you another example of something that happened that people didn't really care about. And basically, there was this girl who was 14, maybe 15 years old, and there were 3 guys, all of whom over the age of 18. All 3 of them sent and or received nude images to this girl on Snapchat. One of them left the community afterwards, after it was exposed that this happened. The other 2 just kind of stuck around, and that was it. People gave them a bit of a hard time, but they stuck around. And that's basically the point of it there is these people were not ostracized. They were maybe given a hard time for a little bit. Maybe people still had it in the back of their heads, but they were still allowed to be around. And I think that's what's important to note there.
What do you think motivates Onision Gregory Jackson?
I think it's a combination of 2 things. I think ego and money, and maybe a little bit of a sexual desire underneath that as well. But I think it's mainly ego, and it's money probably ties into ego. So probably ego is the main thing. When you're someone, I'm sure you've seen examples of this being in television business and whatever yourself. I mean, people who get a taste of fame or get a little bit of attention, they start craving it. It's almost like a drug, people say. I've heard stories about that all the time. So when his hits go up and he posts a video reacting terribly like he did when his Patreon was banned, that whole freak out video, suddenly his numbers shoot up. Right. So he thinks, oh, my numbers just went up 100 times what they were last week. So he'll do it again because he wants to continue that sort of high of getting that drug, which is the attention. And I think that's what would fuel someone like Onision.
When you hear the stories about the young women, Regina, Sarah, Shiloh, Billy, Haley, there are others more speaking out with passing week. Is this a cult that developed?
I think I would say, I'm not sure what the exact definition of a cult is, but it certainly seems cult-like. It's certainly cult-like. There's certainly cult-like behaviors going on there. There's certainly significant similarities to something like an actual cult. I'm not sure if that's the correct word or not, but there certainly are similarities to be drawn there.
He's demanding that some of these young women shave their heads, get tattoos.
Yeah, that's absolutely horrific. That is abuse. That's manipulation and abuse. That's horrible.
I mean, you're talking about a guy who's made a lot of money by damaging women, threatening, harassing, bullying, sexually luring, enticing, exchanging what very likely are illegal images. You ever wonder how this guy's gotten away with this for so long?
If I had to make a guess as to why he's gotten away with it for so long, I mean, people have been talking about him for so long. People have been making exposed videos on him for so long. And I think what happens is when someone has non-stop scandals, suddenly the scandals are no longer scandals. It's a new normal. So when Onision does or says something horrendous, everyone immediately thought, oh my God, that's horrible. But then it happens again. And it's the desensitized thing again, back to what I experienced on the forums. So what happens after that is another scandal comes out and people think, oh no, it's horrible again. But less people think that. Then it happens again and less people think it again. And then it happens again and less people think it again. And people suddenly become desensitized to the fact that this guy is doing it. Suddenly it just becomes accepted that this is a toxic man. People say, okay, avoid him. He's a POS. He's a piece of crap. So people just suddenly get desensitized and they decide, okay, it's not worth the time because he just does it over and over again and gets away with it. And I think the reason he gets away with it is because anything illegal that has happened has never been put on record, I would have said, up until now. Up until maybe the last year or so, to my knowledge, nothing explicitly criminal has been put on record in fact. And I think that's something very important to look at as well, because, like, for example, when he had a history of abusing his exes and whatever, a lot of them were very silent about what's going on. I mean, Shiloh hadn't told her story until she came onto your show, so that's years and years later. So that wasn't out there for people to look at and start with some sort of criminal investigation there. So I think that's a big part of it. I think he skirts on the side of the law. He's always I've always viewed him as a guy who's kind of always on the fence. It's almost like he reads up on the laws. He reads up on the law and thinks, okay, well, that's illegal, but I can just tone it down a little bit and then it's not illegal. Or I can go to this state and it's not illegal.
A pattern of this with the interviews that we've done where, he researches the law. Is it legal for him to go see Shiloh in Pennsylvania when she's on tour? Is it at what age can he have Sarah come live with him and Kai, and can they make her their ward essentially?
That was the most concerning thing I think I've seen.
Yeah. And then you see this video with poor Shiloh, her head shaved, and he's licking her head.
Yeah,
it's disturbing, don't you think, Brad?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I don't know how anyone could do that. It's just unthinkable to me to treat another human being like that.
At every level.
Yeah, it's reprehensible.
Now, looking back, you were a kid, essentially, when some of this was going on. Do you feel that it damaged you in any way, that it scarred you?
I would definitely say so. I mean, I'm not sure I'd blame Onision specifically for any damage I've been caused, but yeah, the experiences I've had on the forums, like being desensitized and being exposed to so much toxic behavior, and the relationship I was in with someone older than me, and my friends around me who I was very close to also suffering in these sort of relationships, that's something that definitely has stuck with me, especially recently when I've actually started to think about it. I mean, I think I've had a lot of repressed emotions, repressed feelings about this. It's something that I've just when I left the forums, I just said, okay, well, the forums are gone now. It was what it was. And it's not been until maybe the last year or two that I've actually thought back on things, I've reflected and actually thought, wait a minute, that wasn't good. That's something that is still on my mind, and I've maybe got issues in my life that I'm now maybe thinking, oh, well, that kind of relates to what happened back here. And I've had other friends who have said similar things to that effect to me as well, where people have said that I've got issues now because of some sort of thing that happened to me back then.
Do you still talk to Regina at all?
I've been talking to her pretty much every day the last couple of weeks on Twitter. I hadn't actually spoken to her in quite a while, and a number of years, until recently. I actually, I think it was around the time when she was just coming into the show, when this whole Onision investigation started, was when she kind of popped back up on my Twitter, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, hey, I remember Regina from back in the day. I wonder how she's getting on at the moment, type thing. So that was how Regina kind of popped back up on my radar. But so I've been speaking to her a bit recently. But
how was it for you to see her speak out? I mean, I think all these victims are very brave, and I think it's important that they get their story out there, and that's why we're doing this. I mean, I look back at the Jeffrey Epstein case, and I worked on that a little bit, but the reason why ultimately there was some justice there was because the Miami Herald went out and interviewed the victims, told their stories, and kept at it. And as a journalist, the lesson I learned there is, we've always done this. It's important to hear the voice of the victims, but unless you keep at it,
persistence,
they won't face justice. The victims won't get justice. A guy like Onision will not face justice. What do you think justice would be for somebody like Regina or any of the other victims?
Justice. Well, I think it varies from obviously victim to victim. It varies depending on what had happened. I would like, for people who were directly involved with Onision, I would say to see him punished to the fullest extent of the law is going to be justice in their minds. To see him punished for whatever crimes he has actually broken, that would be the ultimate justice for them.
When was the last time you had any communication with Onision?
I was looking through my emails just before we got on. I was speaking to you as I did that. I got a few messages on Patreon back and forth, but I think most of those were mass messages he would send out. He used to send them out to pretty much everyone. I mean, I never actually paid for his Patreon. I just kind of clicked the follow button to see what he was up to on there. And I got added to this list, so I was getting the messages from him as well. But prior to that, the last email exchange I can actually find with him is around the end of 2018.
And what was that exchange?
It was about drama about some other YouTuber who was that I've had issues with as well in the past. I'm not going to mention his name, but it was just something relating to that. It was nothing to no friendliness really or anything going on. We were just exchanging a couple of links relating to this guy.
If you could say anything to Onision tonight as we have you on live, what would you say to him?
I would say hello. I don't know what I would actually say to him. I don't have any words that I would say specifically to Onision. I think everything that I've had to say has been said, and I don't think I need to address Onision directly.
What do you think of him? What do you think happened to him to make him act this way, behave this way, target these people, harass these people? I mean, you see the videos. I mean, he comes right out and aggressively goes after some of these people who have spoken out against him in a very vicious, menacing way. I mean, you talk about evidence. He's given everybody all the evidence they need to label him exactly what he is.
I think it's an ego thing. I think he feels as though he's untouchable. I mean, it's back to that desensitization thing I talked about earlier, where after there's been 5 times, I mean, people have said this is the end of Onision. We're canceling Onision for like the last 10 years. I mean, this has been an ongoing thing. So to him, it's just it's a new cycle of news. And now it's you who's at the sort of the spearhead of this part now, this part of the investigation. But in his head, it's nothing he hasn't seen before. It's nothing he hasn't recovered from before. He's heard Onision's been cancelled. He's heard it's the end of Onision a million times before. So to him, he's not worried because it's the same thing again. I mean, it is a bit more severe this time. There is a lot more attention on this. There is a lot more severe accusations and severe criminal charges being looked into here. But in principle, he has been through this similar thing before.
He was deplatformed at Patreon. How bad do you have to be deplatformed at Patreon?
I don't believe you actually have to be that bad to get deplatformed on Patreon. It seems like they've got a strange policy over there at Patreon. Sometimes they'll deplatform one person for something very minor, whereas another time it might take a lot to get someone deplatformed. I'm not entirely sure how they enforce the rules, but I've seen some shady sort of bannings being done there, and I've seen other very good ones done. So I don't know how much I can speak to the effect of how bad he has acted to be banned there, because I'm not sure that the severity was really what happened there. It's like Twitter, for example. He was doxing Billy on Twitter, and that's why he was banned from Patreon. Twitter, in comparison, they only handed out like a 10-hour suspension or something, so they banned him for 10 hours. So I think that shows you that Patreon are maybe more strict than Twitter are when it comes to something like doxing.
He's still on YouTube.
Yeah, he is.
Making money. What does that say to you?
It says to me that the people in the high places, obviously, they don't care, or they don't think that there's a ban there to be made. They don't think it's justifiable. I mean, what I would say is look at their policies. I don't know if there's anything specifically in their policies that they can ban him for or not. That's not saying that whether he should be on the platform or not, but I'm sure there has to be a policy on there that he has broken. I mean, just the amount of things he's been through. I've not looked through their policy. I mean, currently they've got this new harassment policy.
Right.
That's just been introduced. So I would say that a lot of his videos certainly go against this harassment policy. So I would say there's a reason, for example, to maybe take him off. Depends how they're enforcing this policy. I don't know. I'm not sure about the full ins and outs. But
well, just today, you saw the new release that came out today from YouTube, right?
I did, yeah.
So just today, and I don't know whether it's coincidental or not, but it comes on the heels of me dogging YouTube and a lot of other people dogging YouTube pretty aggressively on this specific issue. And I've been in touch with the CEO via email, Susan Wojcicki, the media department, and back and forth, and discussing the potential of an interview talking about this and what YouTube is doing to prevent predatory behavior on its platform. And today, Matt Halpern, who's the head of trust and safety, a vice president at YouTube, came out with a statement saying, basically, they're going to do more, try harder, a stronger stance against threats and personal attacks. And let me just read this to you and get you to react. We've always removed videos that explicitly threaten someone, reveal confidential personal information, or encourage people to harass someone else. Moving forward, our policies will go a step further and not only prohibit explicit threats, but also veiled or implied threats. Now, Onision has done this on YouTube. We've seen it. So is this an empty?
Well, I mean, but it depends how soon these policies are actually going to be fully in effect. I saw today that some people are having their videos taken down already without strikes. Old videos are not constitute, like if you've already made a video in the past that breaks these rules, you're not being banned for that. Those videos might be taken down, but they won't ban you for that. So it seems to me that it's going to be videos in the future now that they're going to apply that policy to.
The statement also says, we will no longer allow content that maliciously insults someone based on protected attributes such as race, gender expression, or sexual orientation, applying to private individuals or YouTube creators. Now, I mean, the sexual orientation in the Onision allegations would obviously be that these are young women who have spoken out against him. But the other thing that Onision has done is go after other creators who have criticized him using his material and then claiming that he should get a portion of their ad revenue, right?
Yeah, he's done that to me. I mean, anyone who's made a video on Onision, I'm sure has had this done to them.
So you do something pointing out his shady, atrocious bullying behavior, and he profits from your video theoretically. If he
pretty much, and if you don't want him to profit, then it's a whole lengthy process to try and fight that. It'll take you a whole month or whatever to try and get that process done, maybe even longer. By the time the whole thing goes back and forth a million times.
So wait a minute, other people are exposing his behavior, bullying, harassment, things, threats, attacks against people who have spoken out against him, and yet he can profit from those exposés? Does that make any sense to you at all?
It makes absolutely no sense. I mean, this is something I've seen very often. I mean, lots of YouTube creators abuse the copyright system. It's a very easy system to abuse, and it's certainly something I feel needs to be addressed. I mean, I've had other creators other than Onision who have falsely claimed my videos, falsely stricken them down, and I've seen many instances of it happening to other people as well. So it's certainly something that I think needs to be revised, the way the copyright claims and whatever work.
Is there anything else, Rag, that you want people to know about your experience in the forums, the victims, and Onision?
What I would say is everything I've spoken about today, I did detail, went into other details for more context on my YouTube channel, Medium Rare. I've made an hour-long video diving into that. But the main thing I would want to touch on is the idea of how responsible Onision is here, and whether or not this constitutes criminal activity on his part or not. And what I would say is that I'm not sure. I'm no lawyer. I'm no legal expert. I don't know if he can get in legal trouble for the things that have happened on his forum in the past. I don't know. But what I would say, so I don't know if that would help build a case against him or be a criminal conviction. But what I would say is that it helps establish a pattern of behavior. The forums being around and the people who used his forums, the whole toxicity on there is something that only helps add to the case, I think, because you look at everything else around him. Toxicity here. He's got this X who's saying this about him. He's got this X saying this about him. He's got X fans saying this. He's got forum users saying that. And suddenly he's also got this whole community where all this stuff's also going on. This is a product of him. It was his fans originally. So there's obviously something to do with him. His energy is flowing through this forum. That's something's happening over here. So this all adds together to create a very big picture. And I mean, I've always been very up on the whole expression that you would say, and this isn't word for word, but people often say, oh, well, what's the matter? Why is everyone always accusing me of these things? Why am I always getting crap for this? And I think there comes a time where you have to think, well, maybe the problem's you. The problem isn't everyone else. The problem isn't the 10,000 people saying that you're a bad person. The problem isn't the million people saying you're a bad person. The problem's you. When something happens over and over again, there is a clear pattern there. And I think Onision has to recognize that the problem is him. And I think the forums help to show that.
All right. What do you hope happens here? What do you hope happens to the victims, to the other people who have been impacted by Onision, to Onision himself?
I hope the victims can get closure. I think closure is maybe the most important thing for anyone who's gone through any sort of situation, and whatever sort of victim you've been. I think closure would be important. And obviously that leads on to what happens to Onision, or what happens to other people who have caused harm or whatever. And what I'd say there is I would like to see these people face the full extent of the law. They should face, if it is found that they have committed crimes, then they should be punished by that. If that means they serve jail time, they serve jail time. And I would like to see that be looked into, and I would like that to be served.
All right. Ryan Reynolds, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Very informative, very insightful, all the way back to your teen years in these forums, and staying up late in Scotland tonight. Thank you so much, and we'll stay in touch on this, and I'm sure some other stories along the way. I do want to mention a couple things as we wrap up tonight. Obviously, that statement from YouTube came out today. We're still trying to set up an interview with YouTube. I'd like to get that done. I'm a little surprised that, given some of the other interviews the CEO has done, that she wouldn't want to appear on this show to talk about all the things that they're trying to do, they should do, they will do, they have done. Onision actually has been reaching out to Vincent Nicotra, their web producer, and it's just amazing to me that he thinks he can push us around like he has pushed around some of his young victims, and it's just not going to work. We're going to stay on the story. We're going to see it through no matter how long it takes. And I do have some updated information from the FBI. It turns out that the Bureau had Onision on its radar for some time. And the fact that we have brought these victims forward has only given it more urgency in terms of an investigation. And I will have a lot more information that I'm able to talk about next week and the week after when it comes to that. But I want to tell you one other thing. We have teamed up with ProStreams.live, which you can see on our fancy new graphic that Vincent helped put together. So you can check us out there if you want at any time. We also have StreamYard, obviously, StreamYard.com, which helps us. Vincent's been working with them and helped devise this this format that we have, this venue, and upon which we can broadcast. You can too on multiple platforms at the same time. So anyway, I want to thank Ryan for being on. We will continue next week investigating this story. As you know, we've talked to a number of victims. We mentioned them tonight. We have another one coming up next week who has another horrific story to share with us, and we're going to keep at it. So thank you for joining us. We appreciate it very much. For Vincent Nicotra, I'm Chris Hansen. This is Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, and we'll see you very soon, if not on the TV beforehand. All right, take care. Have a good night from New York.